Betsy Kramer, Bill Spicer, Corey Bantolin, Eric Friedman, Frank Kelly, Helene Webb, and Jim Sloan is absent today.
Madam Chair, there are no changes.
Mr. Ed Casano, representing INMER.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to introduce a new project to you all, to the Santa Barbara community. My name is Ed Casano, actually the former superintendent of the Channel Islands Marine Sanctuary and executive director of the Santa Barbara Maritime Museum, so Santa Barbara near and dear to my heart. Founded a small little nonprofit called INMER, and we're working very closely with the Chumash community. And I wanted to take the opportunity tonight to introduce you to a new program and project that is under development. The project is called Voices of the Ocean, and it's an indigenous watercraft multi-day gathering that we're setting to take place here in Santa Barbara. Let me just read quickly the three goals for the program. It's to provide a gathering that will reinforce the cultural ties between Native maritime communities by offering a forum for dialogue on the importance of culture, natural history, and place in the face of unprecedented environmental changes. Inspire people, Native and non-Native alike, to consider themselves a part of the global community that has responsibility towards environmental stewardship of their common places, be that a local community, a region, a reservation, or in fact the entire planet. Lay the foundation for a triennial watercraft festival that will demonstrate impact on local and regional scale, as well as measurable results among the festival participants and their respective communities, especially the youth. We envision an international gathering of Native watercraft from around the Pacific Rim here in Santa Barbara on the summer solstice. The big festival, the big plan is for 2014, so we're a little bit out, but we're starting the planning process now, and we're holding an initial gathering this year in 2013 on summer solstice. We're working obviously with the Parks Department and our permitting, and I really just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce it to you. It would be on West Beach, and obviously the significance of summer solstice for all of us, and certainly for the indigenous community, is going to play a very important part in this. But just imagine a dozen Native watercraft gathered on the beach, a festival of great proportions where song and dance and traditional knowledge is shared, and really to bring us all through the lens of Native watercraft, connect better to the sea.
Wow.
So I just wanted to introduce it to you, and I hope to agendize a little presentation for you next month, so we can get this a little more details and share with you our vision as we look at the waterfront department, obviously, and many other institutions in Santa Barbara as key partners as we move forward.
Great. Look forward to it. Thank
All
you.
right. You're welcome.
Are there any other speakers for anything that's not on the agenda? In that case, I'll close public comment. And moving on to the approval of the minutes.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. And now department update. Mr. Riedman.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. In terms of council actions, the council found it in the city's best interest to waive the formal bid procedure as authorized by the municipal code and authorize the general services manager to issue a purchase order to UCP Work Inc. for janitorial services at the waterfront department for fiscal year 14 in an amount not to exceed $238,000 and fiscal year 15 in an amount not to exceed $243,000. As you know, Work Incorporated provides janitorial services in our marinas, marina restrooms, and the common areas of the harbor commercial area. So we're continuing on with that contract. In terms of a brief parking update, following last month's meetings, basically at the request of the Commission and the community that attended the March 12th meeting, Harbor Patrol stepped up parking enforcement in the harbor main lot. As of today, approximately 35 citations were issued to vehicles that were being stored in the lot in excess of this 72-hour limit, and one vehicle was towed from the lot. And we've received some comments that the lot seems to be, there seem to be less vehicles being stored in the lot. I spoke with someone today that talked to someone in Marina 4 and said it seemed like Marina 4 was improving, and we've noticed it as well. And the next step is just during the next several months, Harbor Patrol will conduct operability checks on blue permitted vehicles that do not appear to have moved recently. That's something we do usually in a January, February timeframe, but we held off on that during these discussions. So we'll resume the operability checks next. And tentative agenda items for the May meeting would be a lease agreement with Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary and possibly a presentation from Mr. Cassano. And that concludes the director's report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Scott. We have 2 requests for public comment on the parking issue, and the first is Jane Doe. We got 2 minutes on the...
Thank you. Madam Chair and Commissioners, I have several quick points. There's still some confusion on if the modification on the blue and red parking stickers are pending. There's confusion on if it's been taken off the table or if it's going to be reviewed in July. It would help if we had clarity. I had several suggestions on ways that we could reduce the unwanted vehicles in the harbor, inappropriate vehicles in the harbor. If people have a vehicle that they can't get rid of, Cars for Causes comes and takes those away. We could have a lottery and reserve 10 spaces for people who actually need a vehicle, a step-up, the vans, whatever they're called. But they need to be people that are related somehow to the harbor, that they have a business in the harbor or they're a liveaboard, and that the spaces would be at the discretion of the waterfront. We could give a one-time only $75 off on their slip fee for the first 10 people to remove an inappropriate vehicle. That might motivate them a little bit. The next 10 vehicles that would be removed that are inappropriate, they could get a $25 gift certificate to a merchant in the harbor waterfront area to be provided by the city, not the merchant. And instead of taking away the blue or red parking privilege stickers, maybe we could have a third that's only a 24-hour for people that are only coming to eat or shop or visit and at a reduced rate who don't need the full 3 days. Scott Reedman and I are meeting next week, and I'm looking forward to that. I want to be able to help make a difference in the harbor community. And so any suggestions that we can work on together, I want to do that. The other thing I noticed that in one of our local papers, there's an ad that says that the waterfront stickers are on sale. And it's kind of frustrating and confusing on one hand that there's the complaints that the parking lot is overcrowded, and yet we're still pushing and using money to advertise that there's stickers available. So, and you know, I have compassion for Scott Reedman in the sense he inherited the problem. This is something that's been around for years, but I have compassion for the people in the harbor who live there, who work there, and who want to use their boats and who don't want to see their blue and red stickers be revoked or amended in any way. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Kristen Spaniolo.
Do I have to address it a specific way? Commissioners, I am a liveaboard at the Santa Barbara Harbor, which has been my lifelong goal. I went to college here, and I'm a little bit on the uneasy side about the liveaboard stickers as well. I just want to make sure that it's aware that I'm raising a family on the boat, and my fiance is a commercial fisherman, and we have obviously a commercial vehicle for hauling all of the fishing gear, you know, the nets and the things and this and that. When he goes out for 3 days and I have a baby on the boat, I can't run and go and move multiple cars, especially because it doesn't have a child seat in it. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. Like, I can't do it, you know, because of legalities of having a car seat. And on speaking on that, I feel that it would be imperative to maybe have like a sticker for liveaboards or commercial fishermen that are extended or out at sea for a certain amount of time that would be able to, keep their car there for over 24 hours if that is on the table of them cutting the blue sticker down to, a time frame. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you
Okay.
for your comment. And the next speaker will be Josh Luft.
Yeah, so, well, I live in the harbor as well, and I have a liveaboard permit with Christian, and I'm a commercial fisherman, and I fish lobster 6 months and plus out of the year, and I'm gone out at sea 4 days at a time, and it would be tricky for me to have a permission slip every single time to have my vehicle moved, or, to have a permission slip every time I go fishing to make it happen, to have a vehicle there, and I do live there, and it's so, having two vehicles, it is really tricky, and so I think that there should be some thought put into having an exemption for people that are commercial fishermen and live there, such as myself, and, I feel I help the community out, and so this would be a really helpful thing, not to have something changed to 24 hours. It would really hurt my ability to live in this harbor and function there as a commercial fisherman and, a family member that lives on a boat.
Thank
So-
you. We are listening. We just can't respond to the comment at this point, so.
Fine, so just those things. I just want to be able to, stay within the limits, but function smoothly in the harbor without causing a problem or having the harbor parking lot be something it shouldn't be, but still use it as the way it's intended.
Okay, thank you for your comment. And the last speaker will be, I guess, is there any other? There's no other. Oh, Lauren Bunt. Lorraine Bunt. Who's Lauren Bunt? Sorry, excuse me.
My name's Lorraine Brandt. I'm a liveaboard. I've been living in the marina for 5 years. I'm one of the guilty ones. I have a van. It is sold. I've been up doing some canvassing in the morning on the weekends, and a lot of people that are permit holders still are not aware of what's going on. I was up in the parking lot very early Saturday morning. Most of the people that I stopped that had stickers were completely oblivious. Some of the people that had the blue stickers were not even slip holders. So I'm wondering, what is going on here? Do we really know? And also, what is the percent of parking spaces that are being utilized by these problem vehicles? Is it like out of 650 spaces, is it like 1% maybe? Because when LA comes to Santa Barbara, even if all the fishermen and all the liveaboards and all of those vans are told to leave, there's still not going to be room for LA. So I don't really think that this is really a big long-term problem. It's just a few days out of the year, and those days the parking lot's filling up, even if all the locals left, it would still be full. So I'm just displacing the fishermen and the liveaboards and, whoever is, maybe pushing the envelope, maybe get them to self-police themselves or do an individual evaluation on those problem vehicles. Like, I have sold mine. It is still in the parking lot. It's in the process of being emptied. Maybe we can get some of the other people that have vans like that to do the same thing. But some people do really, some of those liveaboards really do need that space. And some of the businesses, the commercial fishermen and what other businesses are down there, they really do need that space. And another thing is the 72-hour enforcement that you guys are now enforcing. It's a good thing that you're doing, but I think if it's reduced down to 24 hours, which is what I hear, I kind of came here for clarity, I think that would be a really disservice to everybody in the community, because anybody that wants to go down there is not going to be able to move their car every 24 hours when they're trying to enjoy their boat.
Okay, thank you very much. for
Thank
your
you.
comment. Appreciate it. I think comments for the commission now.
Thanks.
Commissioner Bantalon?
Just want to thank everybody for coming to comment, and don't want to respond to any of the specifics, but was hoping to provide a little bit of clarity just on the sort of timing of events and where we're at now. As I understand it, there were 2 public meetings specifically on this. It was brought back to the commission last month. As the commission, I believe we said, go out there, step up enforcement, which it looks like you're doing. And then we're going to look at it, I believe, in 90 days. So just to provide some clarity for these folks and anybody maybe watching, was this going to be agendized back for June to come back, or was it just a wait and see how that process goes and then bring it back as the commission or staff see fit?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bantalin, that would be the latter. Right now, we're working through the enforcement, the 72-hour enforcement of the red permits, and there's no time certain as when we would, resume discussions of possible policy changes. We've not been discussing policy changes at the staff level. We're still brainstorming how we can grapple with this thing. Everybody's got a different situation for why they, need to park their cars where they need to park their cars. You heard from liveaboards, commercial fishermen, and we're working through all that.
All right, thanks. So just to clarify, we're just enforcing the current rules that are on the books. Nothing has changed yet. Nothing's agendized to be changed. And then just to clarify a little bit further, has there been any notification specifically to liveaboards that there has been stepped up enforcement? I know it's been years without enforcing, and so some folks might be surprised. One of the commenters said not everybody knows about it, and so I just want to make sure that we do give folks the opportunity to know that an existing rule is now being enforced.
Commissioner Bantalin, at Commissioner Webb's suggestion, we immediately put out a sign on the harbor entrance saying 72-hour limit being strictly enforced. There have been 3 televised Harbor Commission meetings with PowerPoint presentations, January, February, and March, where we went through all of these issues and some of the scenarios we're looking at, in addition to 2 of the parking committee meetings, which were well attended, and 2 online articles in the Santa Barbara Independent and 1 print article in the Santa Barbara Independent. But we're doing the outreach, that we're required to do in terms of notification and so forth. We've put the committee meetings on the marina gates, just like we do all the commission meetings, which is above and beyond what we're legally required to do. So that's what we've been doing, and we also put out an article in Dock Lines this month to get the word out that parking issues are being explored.
Commissioner Friedman?
Well, again, thank you to the members of the public for coming out tonight. I saw some note-taking going on with staff, so I expect that when this item does come back, that the issues that they raised, that we would have answers for them and report back. So I want to hear that because there were some very valid points that were raised, and I want to, when we do consider this issue in the future, when that might be, to hear those. But can you specifically speak to the 24-hour issue, because I hadn't heard that, and if that is information, I want to clear that up right now.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Friedman, tonight was the first I'd ever heard of a 24-hour concept. That didn't come from staff.
Anybody, any other comments? Thank you very much. I guess the end of that report. Next on with the business report, Mr. Bossi.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Tonight I bring you 2 items as part of the business services report. The first is Stearns Wharf visitation. Staff frequently receives inquiries as to how many people visit Stearns Wharf, whether it be on a yearly basis, monthly basis, what's the day that the most people come out to Stearns Wharf, et cetera. So back in September of 2011, staff installed a TrafSys people counter system over the main walkway on Stearns Wharf. It's just past the kiosk, so people are, and it's just focused on the sidewalk component where pedestrians walk through. Again, this is just a pedestrian counter. The TrafSys program works by picking up, it's a thermal image, and so what it does is even if people are holding hands, hugging, walking out on the wharf, it takes each individual's different heat signature and counts that as a body. So This first slide here is our wharf foot traffic for our first complete calendar year that we have data for. And this is for 2012. And the total amount of pedestrians who went out onto Stearns Wharf was just under 1.1 million. Now, this is on a month-by-month basis, and our highest month came in, as no surprise, July, and that was with 147,499 people visiting Stearns Wharf. Our lowest month was in December, where we had 54,270 people. And even on that low month of December, 54,270 people, that's an average of 1,750 people, pedestrians per day, which is pretty remarkable. This second slide will show you what we consider to be an average summer day. This is a snapshot taken on July 14th of last summer, and this is an hour by hour. As you can see, it's extremely slow in the dark hours of the morning, but really picks up about 10 a.m. and reaches a peak at just about 1 p.m. for the lunch period. Subsides a little, kind of goes up and down, then you see a little spike there towards the dinner time as well. So this particular day, again, had 7,000 people and what we would consider a typical summer weekend day. Now, this information is all interesting, but then you combine it with the amount of vehicles that come out onto Stearns Wharf. Our parking division was able to come up, and they track number of tickets dispensed. And please remember that tickets dispensed are only dispensed until 7 o'clock at night. So this only captures a good chunk of the day, but there's a considerable amount of traffic going on there after 7 p.m. And in calendar year 2012, 251,250 vehicles took tickets on their way out to Stearns Wharf. The highest month being July, similar to the pedestrian traffic, with 26,152 automobiles going out onto the wharf. And our lowest was January at 17,905. Now, with commuting traffic engineers and transportation planners are able to assign a number. They usually assign 1.5 people per commuting vehicle. I've talked with our traffic engineers and our transportation planners, and there's no equivalent number that you could tag on to these folks. I asked if there was something, about wharfs or tourism or just locals, and there is no number. But you can assume that people going out on the wharf, I would imagine it's at least 2, if not more. So when you add that, times that by 251,000 people, it's a significant additional amount of folks going out onto Stearns Wharf. So that's a snapshot of our pedestrian traffic and vehicle traffic on Stearns Wharf. Our next item on the Business Services Report is our free movie nights on Stearns Wharf. The Stearns Wharf Business Association has again teamed up with the city and to bring you the free Friday night movies on Stearns Wharf. All movies begin at dusk, and we're encouraging everybody to come on out a little early, get something to eat, and get a good seat. I can't think of a better venue to watch a free movie or a movie, even if it costs. But it doesn't. It's free. So this year, what we're doing is we're running the movies. We have 6 movies planned, and we're running them in 6 consecutive weeks. In the past, what was done is we'd start in June, get a couple movies, and then we'd take a break over July just because of the activity down on the waterfront, and resume those back up in August. We had good crowds, but there was kind of a disconnect. People, after a month or so, kind of forgot, and it took a while to mobilize those folks again. So what we're doing is we're going to run those beginning the middle of August, August 16th, and they'll run through September the 20th. So we'll go 6 consecutive Fridays. Again, free movies. The movies this year include Paranorman, Despicable Me, Oz, the Great and Powerful, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, Jack the Giant Slayer, and Finding Nemo. Again, all of them are geared towards families. And there is free parking on the wharf available after 7 o'clock. So that is your Business Services Report for this month. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And Commissioner Friedman.
I just want to thank you for the detailed information about the number of visitors to the wharf. I found it fascinating that we were able to do that using thermal imaging. I think that's right. And then also thank you again for and to the the business community there for partnering to bring the movies. I think it's great to get families out there and enjoy it. And congrats on a great list of movies, some that aren't even out on DVD yet. So I don't know how you did it. I don't want to know, but I just know that they're there. So.
Commissioner Bantolin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Brian, for the report. On the Stearns Wharf visitation numbers, I remember when we put that in, and I don't remember how much it cost, but I don't think it was a whole lot. And what I'm curious about is, could we get another one to count the number of vehicles, which would encapsulate everything? And I just think this is a really valuable statistic. Obviously, our property is pretty valuable. We're not usually at a loss for tenants, but I think it could help them with some of their numbers and downtown businesses that rely on the wharf. So I was just curious if that was a possibility, and we might be able to get a little bit more accurate numbers on the cars.
Commissioner Bantolin, we can sure look into that. As I said in my report, we do have a mechanism for counting the cars, but again, that's just ticketed cars, so not delivery vehicles. And we do every day pull a couple tickets just to test the system. So it is pretty accurate. We can look into how much more accurate something like a TrafSys would be. That's definitely something we could do, because it is interesting to see who's going out there, but how many folks are going out there. And it's also helpful for folks like the CVB and the Chamber of Commerce. They've pegged numbers, and quite honestly, they were pretty darn close, just pulling numbers down however they got them, but they were pretty right on to what we found with our different systems. So yeah, it's definitely something we can look into.
All right, thank you. And I don't want it to be cost prohibitive, but if it's only a few grand, it might be something to look into. Thanks.
Anybody?
Yes.
Any other questions?
Commissioner Bantolin, you've seen them around town, those boxes on the curb with a rubber hose running across the road. They're relatively inexpensive. Yeah. And this system that we have now, I think, when I was looking at it, it was less than $1,000, but I think we got a little better model. I think it was under $2,000.
It says, and I have a question. It says that it's on the main walkway. Where exactly is this?
Madam Chair, just as you enter the wharf proper, probably about 20 yards down the wharf from the kiosk, it's on a light pole.
Okay.
So
I wonder if there'd be any way of determining how many cars stop at the parking at the Harbor Restaurant or go out to the Shellfish and so forth. So it seems in the summer there's a real parking issue. There are people going out and not finding it and just driving around and so forth.
That's a good question. What our parking staff does try to do is monitor those lots. So when there is a parking issue, we'll hold traffic at the base of the wharf, so people can either find a spot or realize that there aren't any spots and work their way off the wharf. So that is something that we try to do just on a personal level.
Okay, thank you for the report. Thank you for the parking efforts. Next, the facilities management report. Mr. Triberg.
Good morning. Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. It's not the first time I've done that, actually. The 119 building's located in the central area of the Harbor Commercial area, and we began a restroom remodeling project back in February. This is the home to the Brophy's Brothers Restaurant, Sushi Go-Go, Sushi Bar, as well as the T-shirt shop. And as a public restroom, it receives a tremendous amount of visitorship, so we decided that remodeling it was time, and we would bring it up to ADA compliance. I believe I reported to you last month or the month before, when we began the construction and began demolition, we exposed some serious structural defects to the westerly and the southerly walls, as well as the ceiling joists. We immediately had to kind of stop construction and go out and retain a structural engineer who prepared some temporary shoring plans just to hold the building up, and some more detailed structural plans to remedy all the problems that we found for about $12,000. So the very first thing they did is, you're looking at the west wall here, or you're looking at what used to be the west wall where there is no wall. And this is the shoring we had to put up temporarily and completely demolish the wall, and as well as the southerly wall. They put some framing back in to stabilize the building and get rid of the shoring, and moved on and did some of the ceiling joists as well, considering all the visitorship and all the patrons they have up in the restaurant just immediately above this. Another part of the project, which is really sort of a blessing in disguise, to have to do this level of demolition, it exposed all of the plumbing that was really suspect. And this is 3 different units go through this area, the restrooms and both the restrooms and both of the restaurants. So we were able to segregate all those, and although that looks like a maze of plumbing, it really is organized and is much, much better. We had all kinds of leaks and all sorts of things. So we've put a lot of time and effort into this project, which is eventually going to look a lot like this. This is the Marina 3 restroom we did a couple of years ago. This project's gone significantly over budget for some obvious reasons. We originally received a bid of $90,000 from Southwest Construction. We had some additional engineering costs of about $12,000, and the structural upgrades are about $64,000. So what was a $90,000 project has turned into a $166,000 project. Cost overruns of this nature are absorbed one of 2 different ways. The way we've done this one is within our capital fund, we can transfer money from a project that may be way under budget to projects that are over budget. So we balance our fund within itself. I also mentioned in the staff report about appropriated reserves, which is $100,000 reserves that are discretionary for, typically we use those for emergencies and whatnot. In this particular instance, we were able to kind of balance the budget within the capital fund. And this project was delayed about 6 weeks. Thought we'd have it finished by May. It's probably going to be done by the very end of May. We thought we'd have it done at the end of April. So they're moving ahead. They're going to start setting tile next week, and they've really done a good job. It's been a pleasure working with this contractor who's really moved as quickly as they could considering the circumstances and the damage we found. My next project this evening is the Marina 4B end-tie. This was a project we constructed in 2008. We installed 16 large steel piles to provide berthing for large vessels. This is the new quick response vessel Ocean Scout by Clean Seas. We were trying them out. Eventually this might be a home for them, but you'll notice vessels like the NOAA's research vessel, the Shearwater, a vessel, the Philippa, and also Captain Fred's Celebration was there for a while. He's looking for a new vessel. When we built this project, we realized that the actual dock itself at the end tie was only 4 feet wide and didn't meet state guidelines. State guidelines, it requires it to be 6 feet. So at the time, we looked into systematically replacing all of the end ties on Marinas 2 through 4 because none of them meet the guidelines. As you can see, the piles, the steel piles, are offset significantly from the dock itself. We did that on purpose in anticipation of eventually widening this dock. We designed a project in-house to widen this to 6 feet wide. Shock Construction submitted a low bid of $48,000. So we'll be going out to bid here. We'll be going to construction in June. A little bit of a delay because of the demand for large vessels, especially associated with the cruise ships we've had coming in. As I mentioned, we started sort of a systematic approach to replacing these. The first one was 3B end tie. This was constructed with grant funds from the Department of Boating and Waterways for transient slips. It's 8 feet wide. 4B end tie is this year, and in our capital improvement plan, we have the other end ties in Marinas 3A and 3C in 2015, and 4A and 2C in 2017. It'll bring all of these end ties up to the state guidelines. We'll do all this in-house, too, which is kind of nice. We save a bit of money doing it that way. And my final project is the next launch ramp project. We received 2 grants from the State Department of Boating and Waterways. The first was the Boating Trails Grant of $450,000, which we completed a project on the easterly side of the launch ramp last year. It's for non-powered watercraft. It's the grant funds come from a funding source dedicated to things like haul-outs in rivers and lakes, and we were fortunate enough to receive quite a large grant for this particular project. We also received what they refer to as a public assistance grant of $350,000 for the westerly section of the launch ramp. The middle of the launch ramp was rebuilt in around 2000, I believe, and the 2 ends, the westerly and easterly end, were last constructed in around 1960, early 1960s, so they're pretty beat up. This project is going to be built, was designed by Moffett Nickel, the same engineering firm that designed the Boating Trails project, and it's going to be built similarly using precast concrete panels. I believe there's 38 of them. If I can do this with my left hand, there's going to be 2, oh, I guess I can't. Yeah, I can. There's going to be 2 new launching lanes. These 2 are going to be lanes. They won't have a dock, but they're going to go out into sufficient depth where anybody could launch a vessel and then pull right over to the existing dock. This area is going to be a new washdown area. So when folks are done boating for the day, they can pull over and clean up their boat like a lot of people like to do. Right now, the area is so degraded that it's really difficult to use. Like I said, the project, we have a grant of $350,000. We received 10 bids, which reflects the really competitive bidding climate that we still have here with Whitaker Construction, a company from up north submitting a low bid of $320,000. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to begin construction until the middle of May with a goal of completing it by July 4th. We've had some delays, a variety of delays, or else we would have started a little bit earlier, but we think we can get it done. We're reluctant to really put this off and rebid it again because the bidding climate is just so good right now, and we do have limited funds. So we think it's a wise investment and worth moving forward at this time. And that concludes my presentation this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your, Commissioner Kelly.
Thank you, Carl. I very much appreciate the visual aids you give, because when reading the report, it's a little hard to see it, and I'm sure anybody that might be watching really appreciates those as well. My question has to do with the degradation of the building, the 119 building. Do we know the cause? It looks termite-ish.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kelly, it's termites and rot from water seeping through plumbing that has been dilapidated over the years, so freshwater rot and a fair amount of termites.
Have we a plan in place to prevent those little fellows from enjoying themselves a great deal more in those buildings?
Yeah, we put into our budget, I don't know if it's next year or the year after, we're going to tent the 117 and 119 building together. The 117 building is the long building where the on the alley is and the maintenance shop, and we'll put those both together. So we did get a quote recently for I think $6,000 or $7,000, much less than we anticipated. So we're going to go forward with that and see if we can't prevent this kind of damage in the future to some extent.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions, Commissioners? Thank you very much for your report. And now on to Mr. Conman, Harbor Operations Report.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I think most of us remember back last December the tragedy that occurred out of the Channel Islands when Petty Officer Terrell Horn, the third Coast Guard Petty Officer Horn, was killed during an interdiction with the Ponga at the islands. And I'm happy to report that a fund has been set up for Mr. Horn's surviving wife and children. And the National Marine, NOAA's Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary Council is doing some fundraising. The Commercial Fishermen of Santa Barbara, Inc. have donated almost $3,000. And I just wanted the public to know that are interested in donating to the fund for Mr. Horn's family, that they can Google the U.S. Coast Guard Foundation website, and they'll find a link to Mr. Horn's donation fund, and they can contribute that way. But this is a right-hearted effort that's gaining traction throughout the community, and we're proud to have fishermen and sanctuary folks reaching out and helping the Horn family, because he was serving his country and certainly serving our local community relative to Ponga interdiction. Speaking of commercial fishermen, last year I reported to you that we were trending upward on landings and value, and I'm happy to report to you that that trend is continuing, that in 2012 landings at Santa Barbara were 6.6 million pounds, worth about $10.3 million to the fishermen. That's up respectively 5% and 4%. And the overall value, considering a 4X multiplier for the economic benefit to the community, retail stores, ice companies, fuel docks, restaurants, and what have you, makes it a $40 million fishery, in excess of $40 million. So things are pretty good for our fisheries right now, and we're pretty happy about it. The fisheries that lead the way are sea urchins, lobster, sablefish, rock crabs, sea cucumbers, white sea bass, and halibut. And I think we see some of those coming across the dock almost every day. So this continues to be a vibrant working-class harbor, and we're all very proud to be part of it. And speaking of NOAA, we were mentioning NOAA a moment ago relative to the Terrell Horn Fund. I think many folks have seen a press release, and I wanted to reiterate it here, regarding 6 sea lions that have been found along the coast. There has been a spate of sick and emaciated sea lions showing up along the entire central and southern California coast. Over 1,000 sea lions have been taken in at various marine mammal rescue centers in the last several months. This is several times the normal. There are a couple messages here. First of all, people ask why. How does this what does this mean? How does it happen? Nobody's really sure. Some of the postulations are that this is a population that is 10 times bigger, at least, than it was in the 1970s due to various federal protections, and it may be reaching its carrying capacity, especially in times where food fish such as sardines and anchovies may not be available owing to various oceanic cycles and what have you. But there are a lot of other theories. We're not biologists, but we are here to tell folks that they should stay away from sick sea lions, that sea lions are wild animals, and you can get hurt if you approach them. But what you should do, and we have, through Pete Howarth here and the great work he's done at the Marine Mammal Center, we have folks who are experts at taking care of these animals, and folks should call 805-687-3255 if they come across a sick or wounded sea lion. Once again, that's 687-3255. And finally, I get to report on two of my favorite events, our springtime events, the Operation Clean Sweep and our Harbor Swap Meet and Hazmat Turn-In Day. Operation Clean Sweep takes place on Saturday, May 4th. That's when we're going to go send divers down and have dock volunteers hoist up junk off the seafloor. This is like the 7th year we've done this. And so far we've had over 10 tons of stuff, and we're looking for a good fishing trip on the 4th. We've had a lot of folks express interest in coming down. I know Chair Kramer is going to join us that day. And if folks want to volunteer, we always need dock workers. They can call me directly at 897-2587. But it actually is a lot of fun, and it's for a good cause, and it's a good time. So we'll look forward to seeing folks down there on May 4th. That's May 4th at 8 a.m. is the convening for the Clean Sweep, and that starts at the Travel Lift Pier, and we'll be moving to Marina 1, going through from I through L fingers, I believe it is. And finally, the swap meet is the following Saturday, and that's on May 11th, and we're already getting vendor sign-ups. It's only $10. This is where folks convene in the Marina 3 parking lot. It's become a sort of a beloved local event. We get a lot of folks participating, both vendors and buyers, and sometimes vendors go home with as much stuff as they brought, so it's kind of fun. It's a good time to unload your dock box and sell some stuff and get some stuff. And thanks to the Harbor Merchants Association, we'll have, again this year, free coffee, donuts, oranges, and people are absolutely stunned when they walk by and find out that it's free. So come on down and join us. It's a great time. It's a fun swap meet. And as always, it'll be coupled with a hazardous materials turn-in day. And that's where we'll have a truck down there. Slip permittees will be receiving a golden ticket in their statement, in their May statement, and that golden ticket entitles you to bring a load of hazardous materials to the site, varnish, paint, gasoline, those kinds of things, old butane tanks, batteries, and so instead of having to drive out to UCSB to their hazardous materials drop-off site, this is an opportunity to do it. Empty your dock box, get rid of the stuff that's been laying around in there, make room for new stuff, and you can get at the swap meet, and it's a 2-for-1. So we'll look forward to seeing folks on May 11th and for that, and at May 4th at the Clean Sweep. It's going to be a great month. And that concludes my report. Happy to
Thank you
answer
for
any
your
questions.
report, Mr. Conley. Anybody, any questions? Commissioner Webb.
How are the harbor seals affected by the illness? Is it because they don't haul out, you don't see them, or do they not get sick and emaciated?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Webb, not being a marine biologist, I would have to, refer to someone like Peter Howarth on that, or the folks who manage the haul-out area down in Carpinteria. But what we've been seeing in the watch logs relative to calls for emaciated animals has been almost exclusively California sea lions.
Commissioner Spicer.
Thank you, Mick, and thank you for continuing to point out the tragedy with Petty Officer Horn and the Ponga issue. But my main question goes with the hazmat turn-in. Is that harbor community only, or is that open to any resident in town?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Spicer, thank you for asking. It's intended for the harbor community only. That is to say, if somebody shows up from downtown with a modest amount of stuff, we typically don't turn them away. But if a If a creosote factory truck showed up and had, 2 truckloads of stuff with barrels of odd things, we would probably say, there's probably another site for that.
Any other questions? I have a question about the fishing, the commercial fishing. I think it's very exciting that the amount has increased. And how does that compare? Do you have any idea with other harbors, other areas in Southern California? Have they also been increasing to this extent?
Madam Chair, I can't tell you exactly, though I do know that harbors such as Ventura and Morro Bay and Port San Luis have taken advantage of more liberalized quotas on the black cod, on sablefish, and that's tended to become, if not a boost to their traditional fisheries, it's become a staple for some of the fisheries. Morro Bay, for example, it's become a very important element in their fisheries. So I think several of the Central Coast fisheries are seeing a bump from that. Plus, we've had some great lobster seasons and sea bass seasons, and we've got a lot of great sustainable fisheries going on.
That's great. It's really fine. Thank you very much. And now on to the new business, and the only one we have is the Clean Marina Program. And Jeanette, would you read the staff recommendation, please?
Recommendation that Harbor Commission review and consider an annual report on the department's Clean Marina Program.
Mr. Conman, again. Please.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, all of you have been on the board long enough to have heard this report at least once, and as you know, folks like Commissioner Kelly have heard it a lot of times. Each year what we tend to do is we update several traditional areas of the report, typically the 6 elements of the report that, of the program that we've had since 2002. Well, Director Reedman and I were talking about tonight's report before I started working on it, and what we've decided to do, while we've got an extensive staff report, it's like 10 pages with 8 attachments or 7 attachments, and I would like to alert the public, by the way, when I'm going to tell them in a minute how to access that report. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to be a little briefer. We're going to condense some of this for presentation purposes and try and concentrate on those things that we try to keep out of the bay, and then the ways we go about measuring they make sure that they didn't get in the bay. And instead of going through each one of the 6 elements, which are all covered in the staff report, and for folks that want to look at the various items in the staff report down to the minutia of the statistics, they're welcome to do so. And they would the easiest way to do that is to go on the city's website, santabarbaraca.gov, and on the right-hand column you'll see boards and commissions. Click on the Harbor Commission, and then find today's date, April 18th. Click on that, and you'll see the staff reports. Those reports will be up there for a month, and then come May, the May reports will replace them. But after May, if a person wanted to see this report and the details of this report, they can always call Ms. Brzezinski at 564-5519. That's 564-5519. So hopefully folks who want to see all the details of this report will be able to do so, and hopefully most of the meat of the report we'll be able to see here in this PowerPoint. So what are the main things we try to keep out of the bay? Waste, of course, is one of them. And so we always take a look at how we're doing on our metered sewage pump-out stations, all 5 of them in the harbor. And in FY12, the use was pretty near our 10-year average, about 7,742 minutes. They operated about 20 gallons a minute. And other notable items are the fact that we just received a $21,000 DBAW grant to replace 2 of the pump-outs. And we received a favorable inspection from DBAW in January of this year that they tested the operating speed and the overall conditions of the pump outs, and we got an excellent rating. We also try to keep the bilge water out of the bay, and as you know, one of the primary ways to do that is the use of our bilge water pump out station at the fuel dock. And our 2012 total gallons was about 78% of our 9-year average, and you'll see reflected in this slide and several other slides in this report, that's a downtick a little bit that we believe is reflective of 2 things. Number one, less cruising because of a downturn in the economy since 2008. Hopefully that's beginning to turn around. And also the phased Marina One construction projects, which has made transient berthing very scarce in the last few years. And thankfully, with Carl's engineering work coming up the next year. We'll be taking a break in construction, and hopefully we'll see more transient boaters and visitor boaters coming through Santa Barbara. Another way we keep oil out of the bay is with our oil pad distribution program. This number always is pretty amazing to me. We distributed an amount that was on our 10-year average last year, and that's 17,000 pads. And that's a lot of oil pads. And between this and the bilge pump out, I'm pretty convinced, having been here 13 years, that these two parts of the program are part and parcel as to why we see very few sheens on the harbor compared to, say, 15 years ago when bilge pumps would blurp out and what have you. I think there's a whole cultural change going on and a culture of responsibility. Another way we keep oil out of the bay is our waste oil disposal stations we make available. We have 3 of them, of course. We had Marina 2, 4, and on the fuel dock. And the gallonage for those was down predictably a little bit, just like the bilge pump outs. It's at about 88% of the FY 2000, 88% of the previous year's amount. And it's down a little bit, we believe, because of the visitor boating is down a bit. But people are still using them, and they still serve a great purpose. Marine battery collection down a little bit, about 84% of the 4-year average. But still, our total that were deposited at the marine battery recycling station was nearly identical to the previous year. That's 290 batteries. And considering in Operation Clean Sweep we, get 1 or 2 batteries a year, we believe that this is really keeping batteries out of the bay. It's so easy to drop a battery in the bay, but you know what? When you have a dock cart and this recycling station is right at the fuel dock, it's just as easy to take it up there, and we believe people are doing that. This one's pretty new, the fishing line recycling station. We have 3 of them. We used to have 3 rather low-tech ones, and not that this is high-tech, but this one is actually one that you can compact the line in it and mail it off to Berkeley Line, who recycles it. But this year we sent 24 pounds of recycled line out. And that may not seem like a lot, but if you weigh a piece of fishing line and add up 24 pounds of it, that's 24 pounds of it that's not getting entangled in birds. And so how do we test the water to make sure that it's not getting dirty from oil, sewage, and what have you? Well, as you may remember, we test in the dry season. We don't test in the wet season because it would give us erroneous values and be a waste of money because we're downstream of pollution sources coming our way out of the storm drains and what have you. So we test for between May and October for 3 primary bacterial indicators, and I'm happy to report that no samples at 7 different sites for 3 different indicators during that period of May to October exceeded state standards for body contact. So we had a good year on our water testing in the harbor. Same with East Beach. We've been testing since 2006. We test for heavy metals and for bacterial indicators. And again, our samples were consistent with baseline results from 2006, indicating that we've got good water quality in our East Beach mooring area. So our dissolved oxygen test, you may remember, we do this occasionally if it looks like, a fish are starting to do the little funky thing, like they're not too alive and active, or if we actually see dead fish. We test the water to make sure that dissolved oxygen levels are at levels that are good for sustaining marine life. We've had mostly good DO levels, except last year they were a little bit low in April and September. This corresponds with typical seasonal algae blooms. As you may recall, the big fish die-off in Redondo was in April of 2011. So April, we're almost, we're like halfway through April. We've been watching the water on an almost daily basis, and so far so good. But in case it does go south on us, we do now have a fish die-off response plan. We brought this to you last year. As you may remember, the director and I went down to Redondo after their massive fish die-off and learned from them how they used their incident command structure to respond to a fish die-off. And so I'd like to think we're better prepared now than we were before. And we actually have a plan with contacts and names and organizational directions in our emergency response plan manual. One of Carl's projects that deserves some mention in this report tonight was the replacement of a failing submerged sump tank in the Marina One East restroom. The original sump tank was taking on water. The restroom was built as part of the 1998 marina expansion, and the reason it was taking on water was built with plastic that really didn't hold up over time, and so it sort of collapsed on itself. And Carl's staff, I believe it was staff, we didn't contract this, was it your staff? It was a contractor, thank you. We contracted to have a new fiberglass tank put in, but overall, it was one of the department's most complex projects. It was a difficult project because it is an underwater project, and it was difficult to get it done and not disrupt the integrity of the restroom facility and make sure we got a better sump tank in there. This deserves a standalone discussion, the Santa Barbara Dry Dock case closure. As you recall, this overwater haul-out facility existed for decades in Santa Barbara Harbor. It was always the subject of some discussion relative to its environmental wisdom, for lack of a better description. And that came to a head in 2002, going past the first bullet. The first bullet really tells the story that the Regional Water Quality Control Board staff recommended a case closure at a December meeting that Mr. Treiberg and I attended. I believe I reported briefly on that. But going back, the case stemmed from a 2002 boater complaint. A boater went to the Department of Fish and Game and complained about copper paint and batteries underneath the dry dock and the city pier. And so the Fish and Game's Oil Spill Prevention and Response Unit directed a dive survey at the dry dock, the city pier, and fuel dock, where they collected bulk sediment samples, and they directed staff to analyze heavy metals in the sediment and at the dry dock and other hot spots. And as a result, 6 batteries were removed from the city pier and fuel dock, and further tests were directed. So between 2004 and 2006, core sample sediments were collected from the dry dock, the location of a former dry dock pretty much near K-Finger and the headwalk of Marina One, and at 2 storm drain outlets and at the city pier and fuel dock. And the findings from that effort were that the sediments of concern, and those were primarily organotins from tin-based paint known as tributyl tin, which was ultimately outlawed for small vessels in the mid-1980s, and copper, were pretty much localized below the dry dock. And another finding that was important was the fact that they were virtually immobile due to the fact that that sediment doesn't move, we don't dredge it, and we don't expect it to spread anywhere. And that the heavy metal compounds that were found, and they entered the harbor via typical boat maintenance like at the dry dock. They didn't come from some kind of Superfund site offsite that rolled into the harbor and was contaminating the harbor. It was because of the dry dock, it was under the dry dock, and it wasn't going anywhere. So ultimately, regional board staff, citing relatively low risk with the site due to the removal of the dry dock, recommended no further action was warranted. They actually, at the December meeting at the state water board meeting, it wasn't a recommendation they asked for. They just explained that they were closing the case. And they also noted several of the reasons they were closing the case was because of the department's environmental compliance with battery removal, our overall Clean Marina program, Operation Clean Sweep, and our water quality testing program. So I'd like to think the case is closed on that. We have a few financial accounting issues we're wrapping up with the regional board, but in terms of the program itself, the case itself, I think we're past it, and I'm happy to say that. Anti-fouling paints is always an issue. This sort of is a segue from the discussion of the copper. Just as an update on the AFP, or anti-fouling paint alternatives we've been trying, testing on our patrol boats. In June of 2009, we tested a zinc biocide on Patrol Boat 3. That, of course, is our aluminum patrol boat. It's done well, and we've inspected it, we've reapplied it, and we believe right now it's a suitable replacement for copper-based paint. So until we're told that zinc is equally or more toxic than copper, we're probably going to stick with that on Patrol Boat 3. It seems to be, from what I read and what the discussions in Clean Marina circles are, less toxic than copper, and the uptake is much less in the marine environment. On Patrol Boat 2, in September of 2011, we applied a zinc and patented Econia anti-fouling paint. Econia is a proprietary compound that is a non-copper biocide. The unfortunate part is the paint seems to wear off in areas of the boat experiencing high turbidity. That's typically around the running gear, the rudders, the propellers, and what have you. And it's really, we don't believe, suitable for patrol boats. So we are going to look at another test. We don't mind being experimental because I think it's important for us to lead by example. And so the next time we haul Patrol Boat 2, we're going to have a discussion about various alternative paints. And just as an example, there are a lot of them that are starting to come on the market that are copper-free. This one I thought was interesting. This isn't necessarily what we're going to use, but it's called EcoClad, and it operates on a biomimicry principle. What it does is it creates a film, like a fish would create a film on its skin, that you don't see perch swimming around with barnacles growing on them. It mimics that kind of, biological phenomenon, and claims, its manufacturer claims that the barnacles won't grow on it, and it's a non-copper paint. Very interesting. So there's obviously a lot of incentive for the paint manufacturers to be looking into these, and there are a lot of non-copper paints coming on the market, and we intend to try some of them. There's also legislation at hand. You may remember SB 623, Commissioner Friedman. We talked a lot about this in the past, and it was ultimately pulled by its author. It would have banned copper-based paints by 2015, but taking its place, the reasons are multiple, but part of it was because there were some methodology questions about it. Part of it was that the state wanted to determine some actual leach rates of copper. It gets fairly complex, but that bill was pulled. Another one has taken its place, AB 425, sponsored by an assemblyman up in San Francisco. It's working its way through the legislature now. This would require the Department of Pesticide Regulation to determine if copper-based paints should be registered as pesticides, and it would define control measures for those paints and be the responsible party for determining leach rates. So it sort of shifts some of that responsibility onto the Department of Pesticide Regulation. We continue to participate in the multi-state Clean Marina program, the industry-sponsored one. That's the flag you see flying under the American flag at the harbor. That's not a flag representing this program. That's a flag representing our participation in this multi-state program, and a flag representing our certification in that program. And we were first certified in 2006 and recertified in 2011. And the test for recertification is getting tougher and tougher. And we're very proud to be among the harbors that have been recertified as part of that program. And finally, we have our traditional stormwater pollution prevention plan and stormwater management plan. And this is a plan that describes all the potential stormwater discharge, sources at the harbor, garbage enclosures, parking lots, and the like. And we contract with SAIC to test the water quarterly and to test rainwater, wash water coming off the hardscape and what have you. And they report annually to the Regional Water Quality Control Board. And again, I'm happy to report there were no significant illicit discharges in FY12. Pretty much same thing for the stormwater management plan. We completed this state-mandated plan in 2009, and it requires various what they call minimum control measures, which are very much like best management practices, public outreach, articles in dock lines. We had illicit discharge detection, which you're going to hear about in a minute, and various BMPs which support good water quality in the harbor. You may remember we added to the slip permits a requirement that you not use phosphate-based detergents on boats when you're washing them in the harbor. So we work closely with the regional board on these kinds of issues, and I'm happy to say we remain in compliance with them. The divers still remain certified for their underwater hull cleaning practices, and they're reaching the end of their initial certification, and so we're actually looking to host another training program in the harbor in June. That will be by the folks that did the first one, the California Professional Divers Association. They're based in San Diego. They're going to come up in June, and I have a couple new Harbor Patrol officers that haven't had the training, and we're going to recertify and retrain our business activity permit holders who are in the business of cleaning hulls. It's very important they do that correctly, or else copper goes into the bay. And our salad boat, of course, which is actually more of a salad walk, when they realized a few years ago they do better walking the docks than traveling in a skiff. Typical stuff this year, one unusual item, and that is birds. They removed 100 birds in FY12, unusually high, and it corresponds to I apologize. They removed 30 dead birds, and the Waterfront Department removed 100 dead birds. So we removed a lot of dead birds from the harbor this year. I'm not a bird expert. Maybe Commissioner Kramer could comment on that. But we do our best to get the dead birds out. There's not a lot we can do, and we get sick birds to the Wildlife Care Center every time we can. The rest is standard stuff: aluminum cans, newspapers, buckets, kelp, plastic, et cetera, et cetera. But we try to stay on top of it between our maintenance staff and the salad boat, and the salad boat comes every 2 weeks. Our abandoned watercraft abatement fund, it was a weak year for that because we had a weak winter. We were far below our 6-year average of 10 boats on the beach a year, so that's good news, although drought's not good news. It was strictly due to a mild winter. But that said, we had a $41,000 grant from AWAF grant from 2010 that we have finally exhausted. So we are just now beginning the process of applying for a $15,000 annual grant to carry us from July 1st through June 30th. The sister companion program to that is our vessel turn-in program. That's the program where folks have boats that they say, look, we'll turn it over to you, we'll give you the junk certificate, we'll give you the title, you get rid of it for free. It's a program by which we get boats before they end up in the anchorage and on the beach. It actually saves dollars. And we're working with a $10,000 grant right now. We had 2 VTIP boats disposed of in FY12. And we just learned today in discussions with DBA that we have funds left over, but instead of returning them to DBA, they have offered to let us roll that over for another year. So we have $6,800 in DBA funds in our VTIP program to last us another fiscal year. Operation Clean Sweep I discussed with you tonight. We look forward to seeing people down there on May 4th. That's exciting. We're curious to how much stuff we'll get out of the harbor this year. And we continue our boater education. Of course, we disseminate clean marine information through dock lines and the log newspaper, and we distribute literature. You see it in the foyer of our office. There's tons of literature about clean boating. And of course, we're always educating boaters with pollution packets describing best management practices for boating clean and green. Marine sanitation device inspections are part and parcel of keeping the bay free of sewage spills. They're required for all visiting boats and new slip and liveaboard assignments. We did only 640 MSD inspections last year, which is a direct correlation to fewer visiting boats, since every visiting boat has to get an MSD inspection. It was only 59% of our 10-year average. And pollution violations, there were 10 known violations last year. That's the fewest in 8 years. And there were only 2, and 8 of them resulted in warnings, and only 2 relatively egregious citations, one for an oil discharge and one for dumping buckets of rotten bait into the harbor. So our costs. Last year, curiously, our costs were up a little bit, a few $1,000s over our 10-year average. And I looked into this in detail, and the best I could determine was that it was a function of some accounting issues, not errors necessarily, but accounting issues. Sometimes it depends on when we get billed from our contractors. And by the way, this is net cost to the department. These costs here. This is after grants and after AWAF and VTIP and grant-funded opportunities, and the bilge pads are free and what have you. This is cost to the department. But a lot of this cost is borne in the water quality testing phase to comply with our stormwater pollution prevention plan and stormwater management plan. And sometimes the billing for those plans may come at the end of one fiscal year and may show up as, like in FY11 may show up, it may not show up, and may show up in FY12 when it rolls over, and then the bills actually get paid and posted in FY12. So I didn't find anything out of the ordinary fiscally in terms of prices going cleanup or anything extra that we had to pay for. There were a couple extra cleanup events from the salad boat from wind events. When we're not getting rain, we're getting the cutoff lows, and there's tremendous windstorms below the low-pressure areas, which cause a lot of palm fronds to end up in the harbor. So there were a couple extra salad boat efforts. But overall, I think we're in keeping with our expectations and costs. So in conclusion, Madam Chair, I think the program continues to be an important contribution to our overall mission. It highlights the importance of maintaining a clean ocean clean ocean environment for all of us, visitors, recreationalists, fishermen, and as well as the marine and avian life that depend on it to thrive. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for the report. I always look forward to it. Any questions, comments from the commissioners? Wow. I have a comment then. I would hope it could be on the city website. I appreciate that it's on the Harbor Commission agenda for a month and that people can call Jeanette, but I don't think that people will go to the website and then call Jeanette easily. It would be really, really good if it could be there on a regular basis, I think. Scott, you.
Madam Chair, I do believe it stays on the website as archived video meetings, no? The video. Not the report, okay.
I mean, could you talk with the webmaster or whoever is in charge of this? And
Actually, that would be timely. We're just in the process, the final stages of revamping the entire city website, so
Okay.
this would be an
Well, maybe you-
opportune time to do that.
Can say there's a request that they be there in its new revamped form.
Sure.
That would be great. And you made a comment about the dead birds, and last year was a particularly difficult time for the seabirds and particularly the pelicans. And as far as I know, that there's no known reason why so many were dying. Partly it may be due to the increase in population. For instance, there are now quite a few pelicans up in Vancouver Island in Victoria Harbor, which is really quite unusual for this time of year, and so no one knows. And when there are more pelicans dying. So anyway, thanks for the report.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and we really appreciate the Wildlife Care Center's partnership on helping the animals, that are able to survive.
It's a good partnership. So now, Commissioner Bantham. Sorry.
Just one quick question. Thank you, Betsy. Mick, just on the program costs, see the dry season water quality testing, 1,100, not a whole lot. East Beach water quality testing, which I assume is year-round, 7,790. I'm just curious if there's any info on the disparity. Again, we're not talking big numbers, just kind of popped out.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bandolan, the East Beach mooring water quality monitoring is a requirement of our Coastal Commission permit. So we test for heavy metals and everything else, not just indicator bacteria. The dry season that water quality monitoring we do in the harbor, we test it through El Estero, through the city's lab. So it's significantly less. The tests for East Beach are done in the dry season as well, more or less, but they're just much more expensive tests. By the way, those tests, assuming we continue with clean results, that requirement goes away in a couple of years. So we negotiated that into the last permit. If we could continue demonstrating clean water quality, we won't have to continue with that.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from commissions? And, on to commission staff communications. Is there anything to us?
Madam Chair, nothing from staff this month.
Anything from the commission to staff? Commissioner Kelly.
Yes, 2 points. One, I'm wondering, as we approach the hot summer months, the Santa Barbara Fish Market, when we first approved, I very much like the Santa Barbara Fish Market and the tremendous amount of activity that they're doing and the service that they provide for the local fishermen in the market, but it's sort of turned into a minor fish processing plant in the alley behind the Santa Barbara Fish Market. So before we get into the summer months, I'd like it if staff could bring us back something, if there's some kind of plan to ameliorate their runoff and what we're going to do with it when we get into the summer so that it doesn't pump down that little drain, and how we're basically going to deal with it, kind of thing, before it's July and 85 degrees and it's really baking. Just a comment. I'm wondering if we have a plan for that.
Certainly, we can bring that back to you. Just for your information, we do have that drain professionally cleaned monthly, and bill that back to the fish market. It was done 2 weeks ago, and then it got bad again, so we had it done again this morning, and it's next scheduled for May 8th, I believe. But we'll bring you back a more comprehensive report.
Okay, and then the other one has to do with the janitorial services are not putting it out to bid. My understanding would be if we did actually put it out to bid, we don't have to take the low bid. But it's been so long since we've ever done that. Do we actually know what we could have it clean for if we hired a professional crew? I mean, I'm just asking the question. That would be my only question. Thank you.
We can certainly look into that. It has been a few years. We got a bid we asked Continental and Service Master to give us a quote, and Continental didn't respond, and Service Master came in. I believe they were higher than Work Inc., or not enough to justify changing, but certainly it could be time again to recheck that.
Okay.
It's a social service as well, which
Right.
carries an additional value to it.
Okay.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kelly, Work Inc. does about half of our custodial work, so the other, probably 70% of it. The rest is bid out competitively, but as Scott mentioned, we could probably look at that again to make sure those costs are competitive.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Bantolin.
That's fine. I was just going to comment on the nonprofit nature, and I think that was a council action, right? So I don't see that changing. And I mean, it's good to know the numbers, but it's a good service they provide, and I think it's kind of a win-win for everybody.
Yes. Motion to adjourn, anyone?
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.